Welcome to another deep dive. Today we'll be looking into Ralph Waldo Emerson, and specifically his intriguing concept of compensation. And we're taking a unique approach here. We'll be working with Anastasio Abad Santiago's Spanish translation of his essay, adding a whole new layer to our exploration.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and Emerson, as you might know, was a leading figure in American transcendentalism.
Right. Absolutely. A real pioneer in the movement.
And he had some really thought-provoking ideas about, the interconnectedness of the universe.
Yeah.
Like really mind-bending stuff.
Yeah, he was way ahead of his time in many ways.
So in compensation specifically, Emerson argues that the universe operates on this principle of balance.
Mm.
A constant give and take.
Mm.
Everything has its price. Every gain is matched by a loss.
Right. A kind of cosmic equation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think what's so interesting is that Emerson doesn't just talk about this in, abstract terms.
Yeah.
He actually points to specific examples, like he compares receiving a laurel crown, which is obviously, a symbol of victory and honor, to the actual physical weight it would place on your head.
Wow. That's a great illustration of how Emerson weaves together the tangible and the intangible. He takes this idea of balance and applies it to everything, from the natural world to the complexities of human ambition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one example that really struck me was the myth of Tithonus, who was granted immortality, but he forgot to ask for eternal youth.
Oh, right.
So he ends up trapped in this aging body forever.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a grim outcome.
It really makes you think about, the potential downsides of what we often perceive as blessings. Like imagine if you could choose one superpower. What would it be?
Tough question.
And what might be the unexpected consequences that come with it?
Yeah, good point, because Emerson would likely say that even the most seemingly positive attributes have a shadow side. He saw this duality as fundamental to the universe.
Like light and dark.
Exactly. Action and reaction.
Joy and sorrow.
Yes. These opposing forces aren't just present, they're actually essential for maintaining equilibrium.
And he saw this principle reflected everywhere. Not just in these abstract concepts, but in the natural world as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like Emerson observed that no creature in the animal kingdom is perfectly favored. Each has its strengths, but those strengths are always counterbalanced by weaknesses.
Right. It's like nature's way of keeping things in check.
Exactly. So he talks about the giraffe, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Its long neck, while advantageous for reaching food high up, also makes it incredibly vulnerable to predators.
Right. Makes sense.
Then there's the cheetah, built for incredible speed, but lacking the stamina for prolonged chases.
Interesting. So each creature's unique advantage comes with a built-in trade-off.
Exactly. And this perspective really challenges us to look beyond the surface when we admire someone else's talents or good fortune.
Yeah, we often focus on the positives and overlook the potential downsides.
It's a reminder that there are always hidden costs, even to the things we most desire.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Emerson takes this idea even further by examining the price of power and worldly success. He argues that even the most coveted positions in society come with significant burdens.
Like he uses the example of the President of the United States.
Right, living in the White House.
Yeah, which is a symbol of power and prestige, of course. But also a fishbowl where every decision is scrutinized and every move is criticized.
You're constantly under the microscope.
And Emerson saw this pattern repeated in other areas as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like a brilliant artist might achieve fame and recognition,
Right.
but often grapples with isolation and the weight of their own genius.
It can be a heavy burden to carry.
Material wealth, while desirable on the surface, can bring anxieties and complications that those without it might not anticipate.
Absolutely. Money doesn't always buy happiness.
So if you think about it, what are you willing to sacrifice for the things you want most in life? Emerson's compensation really forces us to confront that question head on.
Yeah, it's a question we should all ask ourselves.
And he doesn't mince words. He believed that trying to separate the good from its inherent burdens is ultimately futile.
Right, you can't have one without the other.
It's like trying to have the sun without the shadows. You can't experience one without the other.
It's about embracing the whole package.
And he saw this playing out in people who chase pleasure without consequence or wealth, without effort or power, without responsibility. And according to Emerson, their efforts almost always backfire in some way.
Yeah, they eventually have to face the consequences.
Have you ever tried to take a shortcut or game the system only to find that it ultimately created more problems than it solved?
Oh, yeah. I think we've all been there at some point.
Emerson would likely nod knowingly and say, you can't escape the laws of nature. even if the consequences aren't immediately apparent.
It's like there's a cosmic boomerang effect.
Exactly. He believed there's a kind of cosmic accounting system
Hmm.
where every imbalance eventually seeks equilibrium.
Makes sense.
Every action has a reaction. Every debt must be repaid.
That's a pretty powerful concept.
And it leads us to one of Emerson's most intriguing ideas,
What's that?
his perspective on justice. He believed that justice, even when delayed, will ultimately prevail.
So he saw it as inevitable.
Exactly. Emerson saw the universe as a self-correcting mechanism, where every crime is eventually punished, every wrong eventually righted, even if it takes time.
Wow. So he believed that things would always balance out in the end.
Yeah. It raises some interesting questions about how we view cause and effect both in our personal lives and on a larger scale.
Right, because sometimes it feels like justice is absent.
Exactly. Like makes you think about those historical events where justice seemed to be absent, or even those everyday situations where someone seems to get away with something.
Right, like they got off scot-free.
Does Emerson's perspective offer a different way to understand those situations?
That's worth considering. It certainly challenges us to look beyond the immediate and consider the longer arc of events.
And I think that's a key point. He's encouraging us to think about the bigger picture. But Emerson wasn't all about cosmic scales and abstract principles.
Oh.
He also had a lot to say about the individual, about the importance of aligning our actions with our values.
Right, so it's not just about this grand cosmic scheme, it's about personal responsibility as well.
Exactly. And this is where we see a shift from the more, karmic aspects of compensation to the idea of personal responsibility and ethical conduct.
So it's about making conscious choices that are in line with our values.
Precisely. And for Emerson, the true reward of right action wasn't about external rewards or recognition, but about an inherent alignment with one's own nature.
So it's an intrinsic motivation.
Exactly. He believed that acts of love, wisdom, and kindness aren't transactions. They're expressions of our true selves.
Beautiful. It's about being true to yourself.
Think about a time when you did something kind for someone else without expecting anything in return and how it made you feel.
Yeah.
That sense of fulfillment, that inner alignment, that's what Emerson was getting at. It's about acting in accordance with our higher nature. Not for any external reward, but because it's simply the right thing to do.
Right. It's about doing good for the sake of doing good.
Exactly. And perhaps one of Emerson's most radical ideas, at least for his time, was his perspective on hardship.
Oh, yeah.
He saw setbacks, loss, and even physical challenges as opportunities for transformation.
That's a pretty counterintuitive notion, isn't it?
Yeah, we tend to view hardship as something to be avoided at all costs.
Makes sense. It's natural to want to avoid pain.
But Emerson seems to be saying that it's precisely through those difficult experiences that we're forced to grow and evolve.
So he's saying that hardship can actually be a catalyst for growth.
Exactly. He writes, "The changes which with brief intervals shake the prosperity of men are warnings from the nature whose law is growth." So it's in those moments of disruption that we're often pushed to discover hidden strengths and develop new capabilities.
Interesting. So he's saying that we shouldn't fear these disruptions, but rather embrace them as opportunities to become stronger.
So it's almost like he's saying that those earthquakes in our lives, though unsettling, can actually reveal a stronger foundation within us.
Exactly. He even uses the metaphor of a mollusk shedding its shell.
Yeah.
Just as a mollusk outgrows its shell and has to create a new one, we too must shed old beliefs, habits, even relationships that no longer serve our growth,
And he has this striking image of those who cling to the past as monsters who look backwards, always fixated on what was never fully embracing the present or the potential of the future.
Yeah, it's so easy to get stuck in that mindset.
Right. And it can be really limiting.
Absolutely.
So Emerson challenges us to have faith in the wealth of the soul, to trust that there's always something new to be discovered, even in the midst of loss.
I love that phrase, wealth of the soul. It's so evocative.
Right. It's like he's saying that even when we feel depleted, there's this inner reservoir of strength and potential that we can tap into.
Exactly. And it's about having the courage to believe in that potential, even when we can't see it yet.
It's a call to embrace the present moment and recognize its power to rival even the most cherished memories.
Instead of dwelling on a beautiful yesterday, he encourages us to look for those archangels, the new opportunities, relationships, and insights that are waiting to emerge if we only open ourselves to them.
That's a great way to put it. This reminds me of a time when I had to leave a job I loved.
Oh, yeah.
It felt like a huge loss at the time.
Yeah.
but it ultimately led me to a path that was even more fulfilling and aligned with my passions.
Wow, that's a great example of how letting go of something can actually open us up to something even better.
Yeah. And it wasn't easy at the time. But looking back, I can see how that experience forced me to grow in ways I never would have imagined.
And that's precisely the kind of transformation Emerson believed was possible, right? He reminds us that we're not meant to be static beings. We're constantly evolving, shedding old skins, and growing into something new.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with Emerson's concept of compensation. We've talked about duality, the balance of nature, the price of power, the futility of trying to escape natural laws, the concept of justice, even when delayed, the inherent good of right action, and even the idea of embracing calamity as a catalyst for growth. It's a lot to process.
It really is. It's a dense but incredibly rich essay.
Right. So much to unpack.
Absolutely.
What stands out to you from all this? What resonates with you the most?
That's a good question. Honestly, what keeps coming back to me is the interconnectedness of everything.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we can't separate the good from the bad, the light from the dark. It's like trying to untangle a ball of yarn where every thread is connected. You can't pull on one without affecting the whole.
That's a wonderful analogy.
Thanksy.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key takeaway from Emerson's essay. He's not advocating for passivity or indifference.
Right.
He's actually urging us to embrace the complexity of life. He's saying that every gain comes with a loss. And conversely, every loss can be an opportunity for a new gain.
It's like learning to surf. Instead of fighting against the waves, we can learn to ride them, to use their power to propel us forward.
Exactly. And in doing so, we might just discover a deeper, more resilient sense of self.
So how do we actually put all of this into practice? It's one thing to grasp these concepts intellectually, but it's another to integrate them into our daily lives.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right, because it's easy to get caught up in the theory.
For sure. And I think Emerson would be the first to say there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It's about finding what works for you, what resonates with your own experience.
Yeah.
But there are some common threads that run through all of his teachings.
Oh, yeah. Like what? Give us some clues.
Okay, well, he was a big believer in cultivating a sense of self-reliance. That means being willing to look inward and trust your own intuition.
Right, so it's about developing that inner compass.
Exactly. He also emphasized the importance of integrity in moral action, not for external reward, but because it's an expression of our true selves.
So again, it's about aligning our actions with our values.
Exactly. Even when it's hard, even when no one is watching.
Like a personal commitment to living in accordance with a greater principle.
Precisely. And finally, I think it's about cultivating a mindset of growth. Seeing challenges not as setbacks, but as opportunities for transformation. It's about embracing the idea that we are always evolving, always becoming.
Easier said than done, right?
Oh, for sure. It's a lifelong practice.
But if we can shift our perspective, see those earthquakes as a chance to build a stronger foundation, maybe we can navigate life's ups and downs with a little more grace and resilience.
I think Emerson would wholeheartedly agree with that. He saw the universe as ultimately benevolent even in its harshness.
Like he's saying, trust the process, even when it's painful, because there's a greater purpose unfolding.
Yes. There's a passage that I think beautifully captures this idea. We cannot part with our friends. We cannot let our angels go. We do not see that they only go out that archangels may come in. We are idolaters of the old. We do not believe in the riches of the soul and its proper eternity and omnipresence. We do not believe there is any force in today to rival or recreate that beautiful yesterday. We linger in the ruins of the old tent where once we had bread and shelter and organs, nor believe that the spirit can feed, cover, and nerve us again.
That's so powerful. It's like he's urging us to let go of our attachment to the past, to the things, people, and beliefs we cling to, even when they're no longer serving us. It's a reminder that there's always something new waiting to emerge, something even more magnificent than what we've left behind, if we only have the courage to let go.
And that act of letting go of trusting in the wealth of the soul and the ever-present possibility of renewal is at the heart of Emerson's message. It's a message of hope and resilience, a reminder that even in the midst of loss and hardship, there's always the potential for growth, transformation, and the emergence of something new and beautiful.
So it's like he's saying that to truly experience the, richness of life, we have to be willing to step out of the familiar, even the comfortable ruins of the past.
Right.
And embrace the unknown.
And maybe that's where true wisdom lies. In acknowledging the full spectrum of human experience with all its complexities and contradictions,
Right.
and recognizing the potential for growth and renewal that exists within every moment.
So Emerson's view of compensation, It seems to offer a really powerful framework for understanding how seemingly opposite forces,
Yeah.
like gain and loss, joy and sorrow, success and failure,
Right.
are actually intertwined, each one containing a seed of the other.
Yeah, it's like they're two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And it's a perspective that encourages us to look beyond the surface of things, to see the hidden connections
Uh-huh.
and the potential for transformation that exists within every
For
experience.
sure.
And ultimately, it's a message of hope.
Right.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
reminding us that even in the darkest of times, there's always a possibility for something new to emerge.
Always a chance for a fresh start.
Now, earlier you mentioned a passage that really resonated with you.
Mm.
Would you mind sharing that again?
Oh, yeah, sure. Emerson writes, "Every excess causes a defect. Every defect an excess. Every sweet hath its sour. Every evil its good. Every faculty which is a receiver of pleasure has an equal penalty put on its abuse. It is to answer for its moderation with its life. For every grain of wit there is a grain of folly. For everything you have missed, you have gained something else. And for everything you gain, you lose something."
Hmm. That passage really encapsulates the essence of compensation, doesn't it?
Mm.
It's a reminder that everything in life has its own inherent balance, its own set of trade-offs.
Yeah, he's not suggesting that we should strive for mediocrity or avoid pursuing our passions. It's more
Right.
like an invitation to embrace the full spectrum of experience, to recognize the interconnectedness of gain and loss,
Hmm?
and to find a sense of equilibrium within that dynamic interplay.
So in a sense, it's not about trying to control or manipulate outcomes, but rather learning to navigate life's inevitable ups and downs with a sense of awareness,
Yeah,
acceptance, and even gratitude for the lessons learned along the way.
that's beautifully said. And in that acceptance, in that willingness to embrace the totality of our experience, we might just find a deeper sense of peace and fulfillment.
Well, this has been a truly enlightening deep dive into Emerson's concept of compensation. It's a perspective that offers a lot to ponder and apply to our own lives.
Absolutely. It's given me a lot to think about.
As we wrap up, is there a final thought you'd like to leave our listener with?
Yeah, I would encourage our listener to reflect on Emerson's words and consider how the principle of compensation might be playing out in their own lives. Like maybe there's a recent challenge or setback they've experienced. Can they see any seeds of opportunity or growth within that experience?
Yep.
Or maybe there's a recent success or achievement. What might be the hidden costs or trade-offs associated with that gain?
Those are great questions to reflect on. And I would add this. Don't be afraid to embrace the complexities, the contradictions, and the uncertainties of life. As Emerson reminds us, there's always more to discover, always the possibility for transformation and renewal.
And who knows what archangels might be waiting to emerge if we only have the courage to let go of what no longer serves us and step into the unknown.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Emerson's compensation. We hope you've found it as thought-provoking as we have. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.